It's a battle of the experts. The judge denied a judgment of acquittal. Morries Hall and Derek Chauvin invoked their Fifth Amendment right to remain silent, and the defense presents and rests their case. I'm Lelli, and welcome to the Lelli Law channel. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and activate the notification bell to stay up to date on all upcoming videos. Let's get started. After the state rests their case, it is standard practice for the defense to request a judgment of acquittal. Here, the defense has the opportunity to make an argument as to why the state has failed to meet their burden. The standard is the evidence will be viewed in light most favorable to the state. Here, the defense presented two arguments. The defense argued that the state failed to meet its burden of proof in regards to the cause of death and the use of force. The defense attorney argued that the state's experts contradicted themselves, and by doing so, the state introduced doubt to their own testimony.
At this point, Your Honor, the defense submits that the state has failed to present sufficient evidence, even in the light most favorable to the state, to establish two of the principal issues or arguments in this particular case. The use of force and whether the use of force was reasonable, as well as the cause of death of Mr. Floyd. Starting first and foremost with the use of force, what the state has essentially done is provided 6 different opinions from various police officers or use of force experts, all of which seem to contradict themselves or each other. As the court is aware, the cause of death has to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. You have the testimony of Drs. Tobin, Dr. Rich, and Dr. Smock, who ultimately testified as to, and Dr. Lindsay Thomas. Those 4 doctors ultimately concluded that it was an asphyxial death. However, the state likewise presented Dr. Baker's testimony, which in large part, while he declared it a homicide for medical purposes, which is not a statement of criminal obligations, or the criminal standard, Dr. Baker suggested something much different, which was that Mr. Floyd's heart simply couldn't handle the stress of the circumstances. So, Your Honor, the state has essentially introduced doubt in the context of providing multiple opinions from multiple experts, all of which seem to contradict each other, and for that reason we would ask ask the court to grant the motion for judgment of acquittal.
The judge ultimately denied the defense's request, and the case proceeded. The defense tried to call Morries Hall as a witness. However, Morries Hall's attorney once again argued against it. Eric Nelson proposed questions for Morries Hall's attorney to review to determine whether he could answer any of the questions. Mr. Hall's attorney explained why Morries Hall was not able to answer any of the questions proposed. She explained that if Derek Chauvin was acquitted, Morries Hall could potentially be charged with third-degree murder.
Cannot answer any of those questions without potentially incriminating himself. We discussed this at the last hearing, Judge, but there's a potential third-degree murder liability here under that overdose statute, which again is very broad. If Mr. Hall puts himself in that car, he's now establishing a timeline of events. So let's say Mr. Hall takes the stand. He very limitedly testifies to, this is what Mr. Floyd was doing. This is how Mr. Floyd looked. These were his behaviors. This is the change in his behaviors. Let's say Mr. Chauvin is then acquitted. He has now given the state on a silver platter testimony to use against him in a third-degree murder charge if they decide to bring it.
All right.
Ultimately, Morries Hall invokes his Fifth Amendment right to remain silent.
There we go. You understand this is your choice, so you could disregard the advice of your attorneys if you wanted to.
Yes, sir.
Knowing all that, you've had a chance to look at the questions that were proposed by both sides?
I have.
Would you be willing to answer those if I were to put you on the stand and swear you in as a witness?
No, I am not.
Okay, and why would you not answer those?
I'm fearful of criminal charges going forward. I have open charges that's not settled yet of my personal stuff.
So basically you are invoking your Fifth Amendment right against compelled self-incrimination?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you, sir. You can have a seat.
The defense then called its own medical expert. Dr. David Fowler testified that George Floyd died of a cardiac arrhythmia He testified that there were many contributing factors to the cause of death. For example, the methamphetamine, the fentanyl, the underlying heart disease, and the potential of carbon monoxide. He ultimately determined that the cause of death would be undetermined.
Doctor, can you summarize briefly what your opinions are in this case?
Yes. So in my opinion, Mr. Floyd had a sudden cardiac arrhythmia due to his atherosclerotic and hypertensive heart disease, or you can write that down multiple different ways. During his restraint and subdual by the police, or restraint by the police. And then his significant contributory conditions would be, since I've already put the heart disease in part 1, he would have the toxicology, the fentanyl and methamphetamine. There is exposure to a vehicle exhaust, so potentially carbon monoxide poisoning, or at least an effect from increased carbon monoxide in his bloodstream, and paraganglionoma, or the other natural disease process that he has. So all of those combined to cause Mr. Floyd's death.
All right, so let's walk through.
The trial will resume on Monday for closing arguments. After that, the case will go to the jury for deliberation. How long do you think deliberations will take? Has the defense been able to raise significant doubt to obtain an acquittal or a not guilty verdict? Or do you believe the state has met its burden of proof and they will return a guilty verdict? We would love to know what you think. Let us know in the comments below. As always, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give us a like and share the video. Thank you for watching, and until next time.